All right, good evening. And we are continuing to be sponsored generously for the month of Nisan by Jeff and Chav Beilawald, Lili Nishmas, Jeff's father, Mr. Roman Wald Avram Ben Shmuel, Zichron L'Rocha, and grandfather, Mr. Menachem Eisner, Menachem Mendel, Ben Mordechai, Zichron L'Rocha, Yortzes, where the Rosh Chodesh Nisan. May their neshamos have an aliyah.
Amen.
And Daf Yomi for the month is also sponsored by Shmuli and Miriam Fuchs, Lili Nishmas, Shmuli's mother, Beila Yenta, Bas Chuna, Zichron L'Rocha, whose Yortzeit is on Rosh Chodesh Iyar. May her neshama have an aliyah. And we'll remember to count Omer at the end of Daf Yomi. Last night was 12. And here's our picture of measurements. That's where we're up to. Shisha Lapar is where we are. Shisha Lapar is 2 dots by
10 lines up from the Mishnah.
10 lines up from the Mishnah. Thank you. All right, 10 lines up from the Mishnah. Shisha Lapar, which I realized I could have pushed for. Shisha Lapar, 6 lugim, right? 6 lugim is half a hin. That's what is brought for the bull. Arba la'ayil, 4, which is 1/3, is for the ram, and 3 is 1/4. That is for the keves. That's for the sheep, the keves. Minolan, how do I know these measurements? Tichsiv, because the pasuk says, V'nis kehem, for the korbanos of Rosh Chodesh. The amounts of that you're supposed to be adding in is chatzi ahin yelapar, half a hin for the bull, and then it continues on. Ushlishis ahin la'ayil, 1/3 for the ram, and revius ahin la'keves, and 1/4 for the sheep. So, and a hin is treser lugi havyun. A hin, as we have been saying, is 12 lug. So therefore, dichsiv, the pasuk shemen zayis hin, that the amount that they needed to make the shemen hamishcha was a hin of oil uksiv, and then it says, Shemen mishchas kodesh yezel li ledorosechem. This anointing oil will be for me for all of your generations. And zeh begematria trei sar havyon. Zeh is 12. That's the second time we have that, right? The other time we have that by the 12 shvatim, as we have a zeh. Isn't that there was some other place where we had the word zeh and it meant 12?
Within the Gemara or within the Torah?
By get. I know like by get we have that.
We have the same drush of 12?
Well, I mean, I know in the first you bring down by the 12.
It seems familiar.
Get also match 12.
Oh, so get is also, okay.
I think there's other one, but I don't know. That's why I remember.
So, okay. So, all right, 12 lugin in the hin. Shloshu mechzel menorah. Then I need 3.5 lug for the menorah. Chatzi lug v'chol ner, half a lug for each of the candles. Minani milura. Now that from the Tanur Rabbanan, our rabbis learned. May erev ad boker, the candles have to light from night till the morning. Tenli midasa. I need to put in a measurement. Shetahei dolekas v'leches may erev ad boker, that will last the whole night. Davar acher, another explanation, and they measured and they realized that that's how much it's going to be. Davar acher, another explanation. May erev ad boker, from night till the morning. Ein lecha avoda shekshera may erev ad boker. Elazu, there is no other service which is kosher overnight, right? Except Elazu bilvad, except for this one. This is the only thing. After the afternoon korban tamid, that is, right? That all the other avodos are supposed to be completed before that. Now we do have the burning of ktoras, on the burning of the emurim on the mizbeach, but that's part of an existing korban that was brought earlier on in the day. So this avoda is completely done at night. V'shiru chacham chatzilug. The chachamim measured and determined that the amount that it takes to last all night is a half a lug. May ursa v'ad tzafra, that comes from night until the daytime. Ikadamri, those say milmala lamata shiaru. Some hold that what they did was they started from the top and they worked their way down, right? So they started the first night, right? They filled it up with a whole lug. And then they tested that and they realized, well, that's way too much. So then they came back and they said, okay, well, let's do a half a lug. And then they said, oh, perfect, exactly the amount. So that's how they knew. Ve'ekadamri, those say mimata lemala shiaru, that they started from the lowest amount. They started with a quarter lug, and they realized that's too little. Then they added a half a lug, that's too little. After they got it to half a lug, and that was fine. So they started from the bottom, or they start from the top. Man damar mimata lemala shiaru, according to the opinion, when they were figuring out how much to put in, they started from the bottom and they worked their way up. HaTorah chasam mamon and sheYisrael, they feel that way because the Torah always goes through the lesser financial issue. So therefore, it's better to start with less and work your way up. The onus says that you start from the most and you work your way down. Because there's another principle, which is that you're not supposed to be poor in a place where there is wealth. And the Torah and the Mishkan is a palace and a place where Hashem Shechina is. And so therefore the king is, we're not going to be cheap.
Wouldn't you feel like, I feel like you waste more oil if you start from lowest to top, because they keep building up. If like, I start with the full amount, just that time, I could figure out how much I left over and how much I need.
You're saying because you could look at what's left.
Right.
That's a fair analysis. I could find out in the first night very much, right?
Yeah.
But it seems that if you start with less, right, think about how much oil I've used. I've used a quarter, and then the next night I would come in and use a half, right? But the first night I would use a full, and then I would have used up theoretically the full, although it wouldn't have burned the whole way, right? There would be some left. But I would have burned a larger amount the first night, and then I'd have to burn less the second night, but I would have can't reuse that oil anyway, right? As we had suggested, you have to re-clean it out and can't reuse that oil, so the whole thing is going to be lost. So instead of losing a quarter, you lose a whole. Next Mishnah. Marvin niske parim b'nische elim. If there is a mistake and you have the wine or the oil or the flour that comes for the bulls, and you mix it together with the amount that comes for the rams. So even though the amount of their mincha is different, the percentages, the ratio is the same. For each isaron, you're going to need 2 lugin for an isaron. That's how that's going to work. So 2 lugin for an isaron. So with the rams, 2 lugin, I'm going to have 2 isronos, so I need 4 lugin. And then for a bull, I need 3 isronos, so I need 6. And it's the same ratio. So therefore, if afterwards, I'm not supposed to mix them together, but afterwards I did, at least I now have the consistency, the same offering is there. So niske kvasim v'niske kvasim, if I mix up the sheep offering nisachim together with the another sheep's, that's also shel yachid b'shel tzibur. If I'm going to mix up the sheep ones for a individual offering versus the community offering, at least it's the same quantities. It's going to be 1 isaron and 3 lug. 3 lug, right? It's going to be 3 lug. So shel yom b'shel emesh. Also, if I mix up the ones that I was supposed to bring yesterday's with the day before, today's with yesterday's. So then, okay, I mix them up together. So then I can still bring it. Aval, however, because after all we had said that you don't even need to bring the nesachim, the mincha offering for the korban on the day that you bring the korban. We can bring it up to 10 days later, we had discussed. Aval, however, ein mar arvin nische kevasim b'nische parm ve'elim. You can't mix the sheep together with the ram and bulls because the ratio is different. Now it's 1 isaron to 3 versus 1 isaron to 2. So the ratio changes. Now you can't mix those two up. V'im b'lalon, and if you do mix them up, elu b'fnei atzman ve'elu b'fnei atzman, you mix them up properly, v'nis arvu, and then they mix together, ksherim, then they're kosher. Im ad shelo balol, if, however, they get mixed up before the oil gets mixed in, so then puzzle. That's no good because I cannot mix it in together. Once it already was mixed, right? So I already mixed the oil up together. Okay, so you had the offering. Now I mixed them together, but at least had the correct mixtures. But once now I've got the flour all mixed together, now I'm going to, by definition, I'm going to mix up oil that's not going to be in the right proportions no matter what way I look at it. Hakeves haba'im ha'omer, the sheep that comes with the korban omer, afal pisha minchaso kifula, even though the other rest, it's 2 isronim, 2 isronos, esronim, it says here in the notes here, it's esronim.
It's 20.
Right? That would
sorry.
isaronim, right? 2 isarons, right? Isarons. So two of them are offered by the korban ha'omer. Lo hayu nechasav kfulim. The wine and the oil was not doubled. It was the regular amount with the korban ha'omer that came to. Okay, now says the Gemara, ura minhu. So we're going to contradict what we just read with a raisa. The pasuk says vehiktiro. That's talking about the chalavim, the fats that are burned from the korban shlamim. You're going to burn them on the mizbeach. Shalo ya'arev chalavim b'chalavim. I'm not supposed to. It says hiktiro, which it doesn't say hiktir. It says hiktiro. You should bring it to say just it, this one. You cannot mix them together. You're not allowed to take the fats from one korban, mix it together with the fats of the other, and burn them all.
Why does that make it like a forbidden fat?
It is already forbidden to eat, right? But it is a mitzvah to burn. That's what we call them forbidden fats, and that they are forbidden to eat. But you do burn them for the korban. But you don't mix them together. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, so therefore, it seems like even though they both have the same din, you're not supposed to mix them together. Our Mishnah said that if they have the same ratio, you can mix them together. What's the issue? Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Im nis arvu kamar. We're not saying you can mix them together. You're saying if they were mixed together. Our Mishnah, right? So our Mishnah is just saying you're not supposed to mix them together, but if you did, you can still bring it. Whereas this is saying don't mix the fats together. But obviously, if you did, you could still bring it. So ihachi, if that's true, then how do you understand the end part of our Mishnah? The end part of our Mishnah says, Ve'ein ma'arvin niskei kevasim beniskei parim ve'elim. You're not allowed to mix the sheep oil and wine together with the one from the bulls and the rams. Va'afilu nis. So, which means, and then we said, and if you did, right, that would, but if you did, so then afilu nis arvu nami lo. So that would mean, right, if the beginning part says you're not allowed to mix it together, but it says you can, then the second part which says you're not allowed to mix together means even if you did, you can't, which means they're puzzle. Well, then how many can I say for? What does the last part say? B'lalon elu b'fnei atzman ve'elu b'fnei atzman. If you mix the two of them together separately, v'nis arvu kshir, and then they can be kosher. Mikal dereish lechatchila. That means the beginning has a chil, because what we're saying here is that if you did it, so then it's kosher, which means that before, when we said you're allowed to bring these two together, the bulls and the rams, that must mean in the first place. So which one? So it's lechachila kamer. So Amar Abaye says hachi kamer. This is what it means to say. Me'arvin yenon im nisarev sultan vishamnon. What the Mishnah is saying is, you're not supposed to mix the mixtures together. However, let's say you've already made a mistake. You've already mixed up the flour and the oil. If that's the case, then lechatchila, go ahead and mix the wine up. Doesn't matter anymore, right? May as well. They're already mixed up, and that is okay. Ve'yenon lechatchila lo. But what you're suggesting is that only happens once you've already mixed the oil and the wine and the oil and the flour up. Then you're allowed to mix the wine up, which means that in the first place you can't mix the wine up. Is that true? The haltanya, we learned in a brisa, b'medvar mamurim. When is it true that you're not allowed to mix together the nisachim, the oil and those things of the sheep, with the ones of the bulls and the rams? Bisolos v'shemen. That's the flour and the oil. Yayin me'arvin. But the wine you can mix together. So what do you mean you can't mix it now? It seems you can. El Amar Abaye. So Abaye says, okay, hachi kamar. This is how you have to interpret it. Heicha de hukdar sultan v'shamnon. If you've already burned, it's too late, you've already burned up the flour and the oil, according to the right procedure, me'arvin yayin l'chachila. Then you're allowed to mix the wine together. Heicha de lo hukdar. If you've mixed them together and you have not burned them yet, and now they're mixed up, im nisariv sultan v'shamnon, once they are mixed together, ma'arvin nami yenon. Then b'di'eved, you can go ahead and mix the wine up. V'im lav, if however they were never mixed together, ein ma'arvin, you're not allowed to mix the wine together. Why? Dilma asi le'eruve solos v'shemen lechatchila, because people might think, well, if I mix the wine together, I can mix the oil and the flour together, and that for sure lechatchila we cannot do. Only after the fact that's acceptable, but you're not allowed to mix the oil and the flour together. Only allowed to mix the wine together once the offering has already been burnt. Okay. Kavas haba im ha'omer. So now we have the sheep, which comes together with the omer, which we said that the amount of flour is doubled, but the amount of oil and wine is the same. Tana Rabbanan, rabbis learned. Where we see this from? Uminchaso shnei esrom. The korban mincha that comes with the sheep of the korban omer is 2 esronim. Limit al keves habayim omer sheminchaso kefula. That tells us that it gets a double portion of flour compared to every other sheep. Every other sheep gets 1. The omer gets 2. Yachol kishem sheminchaso kefulu kach yenu kaful. I might think that if the flour is doubled, so too the wine should be doubled. Talmud lomar. Therefore it says v'nisko yayin revi'is ahin. No, the amount of wine is the quarter of a hin, just like the rest of the sheep. 3 Look, Yachol lo yehayeno kaful she'eno nirvlal im minchaso. Fine, I understand the wine. Maybe I don't add extra wine. Why? Because it's not mixed together with the flour. The wine is poured into the bowl separately, as we said, that tube that was on the corner of the mizbeach, poured in separately. Aval yehei shmano kaful, but the oil, which is shenivlal im minchaso, which is going to be mixed together with the korban mincha, that should be doubled. So we keep the standard ratio of flour to oil. Tamalomar, don't think that. The pasuk says venisko. It's nesach. It's liquid. What do you call it in English? Libations. So I was trying to avoid using the word libations because that's one of those English words that nobody knows what it means, right? It's the oil that comes together. Kol nisachav lo yu ela revius. It means that it has the same wine and oil in the amount of a revius. So my Talmudah, how do you see that? It just says that it's nesach. It doesn't say how much that nesach is. So how are you deriving from that it should be a quarter? Yes, you look impatient.
So a ritual pouring of fluid?
Yes.
Of liquid, often wine, oil,
that's libations.
Or oil?
Yes.
As offering to the city, spirit, or memory of the dead, or whatever it is.
Right. There you are. That's our libation. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to avoid using the word. Amar Rabbi Elazar.
It's a good thing you're trying to avoid it.
Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says, Ksiv veniska, says in the female form, right? Pasuk says that it's written veniska with the word hey. Vikarinon, but the word is pronounced venisko. So what's going on? Ketzad, which how are you going to explain why it's written with a hey and pronounced with a vav? Niska de mincha kenisko de yayin. Right? The nesach of the mincha, that's the feminine, the word mincha is a feminine word. The nesach of the mincha, which is the oil, is kenisko, like the nesach of the animal, the masculine form, of the wine. Ma yayin revius, af shemen nami revius. Just like the wine is a revius, so too the oil is revius. The niska of the mincha is the same as the nisko of the animal. Quarter of a lug. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, speaking of this week's parsha, Asham Mitzora, Sheshchato Shelo Lishmo, the Asham of the Korban Mitzora, if you do the Shchita not for the sake of the offering, which we said is still valid, just doesn't work for the person who's bringing the Korban, he's got to bring another one, Ta'on Nesachim, you still have to bring the Nesachim that to go together with it, right? You still are going to bring the oil and the wine that goes with it. Sheim Iyata Omer Kain, because if you don't say that, so then pisalto, you have ruined the korban. And we know that you're supposed to bring it. It's a kosher korban. And if it's an asham and it's a kosher korban, you've got to bring all of the things that go with it. Maskif Rav Menachos bar Goda. So Rav Menachos bar Goda asks the following question though. Ela me'ata. If that is true, right, that even if you shechtish lo lishma, right, not for the right purpose, you're still going to bring the extra nesach together with it so that it won't become invalidated. Kevas haba'ima omer. What about the sheep that comes with the korban omer? Sheshchato shelo lishma. Let's say they shecht that one and not for the right purpose. Te minchaso kefula. Well, does its mincha stay doubled? Right? Why? Or is it now just an ola? Or is it just like any other ola offering and you're going to bring just one isaron? It should be doubled. Why? Why? Because if you don't say that, pisalto, you would have invalidated it as a korban had you brought it with only one isaron, because this korban omer requires two. V'tamid shel shachar, also the korban tamid every morning, sheshchato shel lishmo, if you bring that one with the right intent, yeton shnei gezirin bekohen echad. It's going to require the two logs that go with it. The korban tamid in the morning has new logs put on the fire, and then you bring the korban tamid. So what they're suggesting is that if what you're saying is true about the mitzora, that the extra amount, whatever the korban would have required originally, if you bring it shelo lishmo, it still requires all of the other ancillary components. I didn't want to use the word ancillary. I don't want to use the word ancillary components, right? I don't want you to look it up. The other ancillary components, I'm using my SAT words today. My ancillary components are still required because otherwise you'll invalidate the offering. Shem iyat ta'omer king, because if you don't require these two logs, psalto, you're going to invalidate the korban tamid. So vitamin shall be in the afternoon korban. Also, also going to require 2 logs to be placed on the fire with 2 kohanim. Because if you don't know that, if you don't do that, that would invalidate that offering. So in Achinami, you're right. It's exactly right. You got it. Now you get the rule. El Amar Abaye. So Abaye says, so then, okay, the question is, if that's true, so then why did you specifically pick on the Asham Mitzorah to say that you have to bring its libations when, when you could have brought all of these other ones? So Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Chadami Naihu Nakat. That's, they just picked one, right? That basically teaches us the rule. Now I know the rule, it's true about all of them. It's actually true. Whatever the korban was supposed to be, I got to bring it exactly that way, even though I ruined it by having in mind the wrong korban when I shechted it. Now, Rabbi Abba Omar, Bishlam Hanach Olos Ninhu. Rabbi Abba says, no,
Rava.
not true. Sorry.
Yeah, they're saying Rava Amar.
Rava Omar.
Girsa.
Yeah, Rashi changes it to Rava, right? Rava says, right? So that is
In bracket says Rabbi of Rabbi El.
right, Vav. Tzarech Lomer Rava Amar. That's the Girsa, the Tosfos Dibur Maskil, right? That's a good point. Thank you. So that is Rava. We change it to not Rav Abba, but Rava. Right? All you got to do is drop the first aleph, and then you would wind up with it properly. Right? So you can see how the text got changed. So, Bishlam Hanach Olos Ninhu. I understand by the other korbanos, those are olos. So ilo chazu olos chova, karvi olos nedava. So those, I don't need to bring the extra parts to it. Because what happens if I bring an ola shelo lishma? I can still bring it as an ola. Why? Because an ola can come for any, I don't need a purpose to bring an ola. I can bring an ola at any time I feel like it. So therefore, if I had an ola that was a tamid, and now it's not an ola of a tamid, so I could just bring it like a regular ola without the logs.
Even if it's nighttime?
No, you can't bring it during nighttime, but you can bring an ola. Thank you. When I said anytime, I mean anytime that you can bring any korban, right? Thank you for clarifying. Therefore, since Kavi Lolas Nadava, so therefore the logs would be unnecessary because I could still bring this as an Ola minus the logs. That would be a regular korban. Elahacha, but here by the asham of the person who has tsaras, ilo mukmis le bimil say, if you're not bringing it in the original state with the original libations that come with it, asham nadava miyika. How could you bring a korban asham at all? What would be your excuse? I'm bringing a korban asham. You can't bring a korban asham if it's not this korban asham for tsaras. You have no right to bring Korban Hashem. You can't voluntarily give a Korban Hashem. So therefore, it has to be brought like the original Korban Hashem, because that's the only reason you'd be bringing it. Korban Ola is not that way. Korban Ola, I don't have to bring it like the original Ola, because I can bring it like any other Ola, and it would still be valid. So therefore, that's a different answer. That's why they specifically picked on the Asham Mitzorah, because that's the one that has to be brought together with its original libations, but the Korban Ola of the other types does not have to be brought with the extra ancillary components. Tanya Kavasi Rabbi Yochanan. We have a brisa that supports what Rabbi Yochanan said, though. Asham mitzorah sheshchata shel lishmo, the korban asham of a mitzorah that you shechted not for the right intent. O shelo nosam midamo agave bahonos, or if you don't place the blood on the thumbs and the toes of the person who has a mitzoras in order to purify him. Harezu ola legabe mizbeach. It can still be brought as a korban asham on the mizbeach. V'ton nisachim, and you still have to bring the rest of the parts of the offering like you would regular korban asham of mitzorah. V'tzorach asham acher lahatiro, and you have to bring another korban asham, obviously because the first one doesn't count for the owner, as we learned in the very beginning of Maseches Machim. Remember all that time ago? And that didn't make so much sense to us when it happened. Now we totally get that. That's so easy.
I don't remember doing Zlachim.
Okay, says the Mishnah. Next Mishnah. Kol midos sheba migdosh hayu nigdoshos. All of the utensils, were steeped. Right? Heaping? They're heaping. They were heaped. Right? That means that in order to get the fully saron in, you had to pile it up over the top of the container.
Interesting.
Right? Chutz mishal Kohen Gadol, except for the isaron of the Kohen Gadol. Why? Shaya god shel etocha. Because they needed to, had to take the isaron and they had to then split it in half. And you don't want it spilling out during that process when you've got to, I guess, be splitting or cutting or whatever. So you don't want any spilling out. So that measurement was larger, right? It had enough space to contain the entire offering within its size. Sounds like it was machlokas before, right? So hang on.
That was a nick.
Right? We had that argument before.
Illustrate that.
They think they do. Yes. I think they do. That's great. If you look through I was looking through that index the other day, and it's amazing how helpful it is.
Is that right?
Yes.
Huh?
That's right.
Close to the bottom, like it was into the street, that's how I know.
Right. Everything we've been talking about is now all illustrated in pictures in the back there. It's going to be after that. Here we go. Because I was looking through this because it was right. So they don't show it heaping here, right? Well, maybe they will, right? Here's again. This is what we were just discussing for each of the animals. 3 Yisron for half a hin, half a lug, right? 2 Yisron, etc. They make the picture smaller and smaller, not like the opinion that says that you need more.
Right.
And then it tells us how to do each of the offerings. And it does not heap them over the top, right? The Yisron in the picture does not heap it over the top. Right? So that was what we want to know. We can write them a note. Write them a letter and say, this is the one we're talking about, the Minchas Chova, right, which was of the Kohen Gadol. It was 1, and then it got divided into 2, which they then further subdivided in order to create all the loaves that they needed. Everything is in this, all the pictures. It does a really great job doing that, making all the nice pictures, but it does not heap. It does not heap, right? So we'll see whose opinion is. Maybe they just don't hold of that opinion. Midas halach, the liquid measures, Beirut sehen, the surface tension, the extra that comes over the top of the surface tension, Kodesh, it is sanctified. Umidas hayavesh, Beirut sehen chol. But all that is heaped over the top, when it comes to the dry measurements, is not sanctified. Rabbi Akiva says, Midas halach Kodesh, lefichach Beirut sehem Kodesh. The utensil of liquid measurements is itself sanctified, itself sanctified and holy. Therefore, the overflow, the extra little bit that comes over the top, is also sanctified. Midas hayavesh chol, but the dry measurement is not sanctified. Lefichach beirut sehen chol, and therefore the over the top is not sanctified because it's not contained in the container. And we will see what's going on there in a moment.
Because it has to be kash to a kli?
In the kli, right? But we're saying the kli is in Kodesh anyway, so why is that? So hang on, we'll get to it. Rabbi Yossi says, Lo mishum zeh el halach nekar v'hayavesh ino nekar. That's not why. It's just that when you pour liquid into the container, the liquid that's going to be eventually over the top, first came into the container and it was inside the container. Then it fills up. As it fills up, gets to the top. It's the liquid that's on top was at one point inside the container. When you take dry measure and you pour that in, the stuff that piles up on top was never inside the container. Okay, says the Gemara. Let's explain what's going on. Let's first of all start off with who is this Mishnah? Rabbi Meir, if this is Rabbi Meir, who we said before that there were 2 types of containers of an Isaron. So Chad Godush Hava, so then only one of them was heaped. Right? We only had, not all of them were heaped, right? That's true. There's only one that was heaped. That was, right? Only the Kohen Gadol's was not, and then there was, right? It's not, but the other 2, the Kohen Gadol's Isaron was not heaped, and neither was the smaller containers were not heaped. So therefore, you can't explain the Mishnah that says all of them were heaped. They're not true. If it's the Rabbanan's opinion, there was only one container, and we already established that they held that it wasn't heaped. The Yisrael was one container, and it wasn't heaped. So Amar Rav Chisda says, Rabbi Meir. It is Rabbi Meir's opinion. Umay kol midos. What do you mean? All of the midos? It means kol medidos. Whenever they used this container to measure, they would heap it. Right? Obviously, the other containers that contained less, they didn't. The other containers that contained more, they didn't need to heap. They wouldn't heap those. But whenever they measured, it heaped. So it's Rabbi Meir's opinion. Okay. Midas halach beirut sehen kodesh. The liquid measures, the part that sticks over the top, is kodesh. So now, let's discuss, what is this argument, the point of argument between these three opinions, the Tanakama, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Yossi? Hamaika miflagi, what is it that they're arguing about? Tanakama, so for the first opinion, is midach halach nimshecha bein mi bifnim bein mi bachutz. The Tanakama holds that when they anointed the liquid measures, they anointed them both on the inside and the outside of the container. The entire container was holy. Therefore, the extra that goes over the top, right, comes over the lip of the utensil, and since the lip of the utensil was also sanctified, everything, even that which is over the top, is also sanctified. However, midas yavesh, the dry utensils, nimshecha mi b'fnim, they were only sanctified on the inside, velo nimshecha b'chutz, but not on the outside. Therefore, the part that was over the top was not sanctified, only the part that's inside. Rabbi Akiva savar, Rabbi Akiva holds midas halach nimshecha me b'fnim b'chutz. He says that when it comes to the liquid, they were sanctified both inside and outside. Midas yavish lo nimshecha kol ikar, but the dry one was not sanctified at all. So therefore,
Keep it held. That's why he's yavish. It was never kodesh anyways. But by what's it called?
It was only sanctified by declaration. That's the point. So therefore, since it's not being sanctified by the utensil, only that which you needed is sanctified.
Right.
Okay, so that's what's happening. For Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yossi says ed v'ed, both of the dry one and the liquid one, nimshecha mi b'fnim v'lo nimshecha mi b'chutz. They weren't sanctified. And so, here's the rationale. They were sanctified inside, but not on the outside. And the rationale why, even though things that are on the outside of the utensil, the over the top, is sanctified, is because delach nakar, the liquid that's on the outside, was once on the inside of the utensil, and it got sanctified. Megavo demona kaasi, because it comes from the inside of the utensil. Ve'yavesh enon nakar, but the dry never was inside the utensil, therefore it never got sanctified. Okay, v'chi nakar mai havi. So, what difference does it make if it is no longer in the utensil now? When you poured it in, you didn't intend to use it. Gavra l'maiditzarach kamekavi, and the person only intends to the person is only going to sanctify whatever he intends to use. So that which is overflowing is unnecessary, so therefore it shouldn't be sanctified. So, Amar Rav Dimi Bar Shishna Mishmei Rav. So Rav Dimi Bar Shishna says the name of Rav. Zosomers Klisharis Mekachin Shalom Midas. It stands to reason that the utensil can sanctify even against one's will, right? Person who's bringing doesn't want the extra wine to become sanctified, nevertheless it sanctifies it. What's in the utensil, it's too bad. Ravina Amar Ravina says, I don't want to answer that because that's a subject to much discussion and debate in several places. Ravina Amar Liolam Emalach Klisharis Ein Mekachin Elamidas. Maybe the utensil doesn't sanctify unless you have intention to sanctify that which is in it. Veg Ugzera, and here there's a rabbinic decree. Shema Yom Motzian Miklisharis L'chol. Really, the stuff that's on the outside is not sanctified. But if people see that you're going to take a drop and you're going to say, well, it's outside the utensil, therefore it's not sanctified, and you just use it for another non-sanctified purpose, people are going to think, oh, I didn't realize you could do that. Let's just take more out of the utensil and keep using it. But the stuff in the utensil is sanctified, so you can't do that. Mosif Reb Zera. So Reb Zera asks the following question. Sidras halechem v'sabazichin liachar Shabbos. Let's say you're doing the lechem apanim service, and you're supposed to do it on Shabbos. And the way that it works is you do it on Shabbos, and then it sits on the shulchan for 7 days, and that's sanctified for 7 days, and then you switch it out the next week. Okay, let's say he put the lechem apanim and the frankincense on Sunday. He puts it on the shulchan on Sunday. V'hikter sabazichin b'Shabbos. Then comes the next Shabbos, and he takes the frankincense and he burns it. Psula. That is not valid, right? Why? Because it wasn't on the table for 7 days. It doesn't become sanctified until it's been on the table for 7 days. It's only been on for 6 days. It's not sanctified. That is an invalid offering. Ketzad yaseh. So what should you do? Now that you have messed up and it's Sunday and you need to put the bazichin on. Yanichanu, so put it on. And l'Shabbos haba, and then you've got to leave it on there until the following Shabbos. So you leave it for a whole Shabbos, you leave it to the end of the week, and then another Shabbos till after that. Shafilu hu al shulchan yomim rabim, because even if it's on the shulchan for extra days, ein bekach klum. That's not a problem. So therefore, as long as it needs to be on there for at least 7 days to sanctify it, and you want to get back to doing it every Shabbos, let it go to Shabbos, and then another Shabbos. So why should that be that if you leave it on there for 13 days, It's not ruined. Hasamnami lema gzera shema yomru mafkidin bekli shares. Maybe what people will think is that you're allowed to leave something that is holy and sanctified in holy utensils, and they're not going to become they're not going to become ruined. Belina. Normally we have a sacrifice. So I have a sacrifice and I wait till nighttime, then it becomes ruined at nighttime. So it becomes past its right time. So people are going to take a look at this lechem hapanim, and they're going to see the frankincense in here, and they're going to say, oh, a Shabbos. Oh, they didn't do anything with it. Well, it stayed there all week. Now it's like, must be past the time because it's supposed to be done last Shabbos. Oh, and now it's a kosher korban? That means that as long as I keep my holy objects inside of my utensil, it's okay. But that's not true. So therefore, why are we not making a rabbinic decree? If we make a rabbinic decree about not taking the very top of the liquid off of the container, why don't we make other decrees just like it? Say that you're not allowed to use these the frankincense from this offering because people might think that you're allowed to leave things on a sanctified utensil for beyond its amount of time. So the answer is pnim achutz karamis. What are you comparing? You're talking about things that are inside the Beis Hamikdash, things that are outside the Beis Hamikdash. Pnim lav kol yamayodi. Who knows? Nobody knows what's going on inside the Beis Hamikdash. Nobody's going to make a mistake and think that what's going on in the Beis Hamikdash is, they don't know. Chutz kol yamayodi. Outside, everybody sees. Everybody will make that mistake. So outside is a different story. Tanan Hasan, we learn in a Mishnah in Maseches Shkalim. Moser nesachim leketzim mizbeach. The extra of the if any extra money that you have left over after you're supposed to be doing your nesachim goes to be purchasing. You're allowed to purchase sheep in order to make olos on the mizbeach when the mizbeach is not in service. Kates meaning harvested dates, which is what they used to use for desserts. My moser nesachim. What is extra? What does that mean? Extra of the libations. Rabbi Chia bar Yosef says beirutze midos. Right, whatever was the overflow from the top, they would scoop that off, put that on the side, and then that's what it is. And then it was redeemed, and that's how they would purchase. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Ke'osa sheshaninu." It's like we learned in a Mishnah in Hamakabel of L'Safek Sulasos Me'arba Ve'amdu B'Shalosh. What happens is, let's say somebody the Beis Hamikdash made a contract with somebody to supply flour for korbanos, and they made it so that they were going to supply the flour from 4 se'ah for each selah. It was going to be a 4 se'ah for each selah. And what happens is ve'amdu b'shalosh. Now the price goes down, right? So therefore, the price goes up, and so now you're only going to get 3 se'ah for this 1 selah. So what happens is, Yisafik Me'arba, the deal was made. You got to go by the original price. You got to sell it at 4-1, not 3-1, because the price was already made. Mishalosh, what if it goes the other way? They agreed that they were going to supply 3, and V'amdu Me'arba, and the price goes down to 4. Yisafik Barba, now he's got to change the price. Why? Shiyad Hektish Al Yona. Special rules by the Beis Hamikdash. And you're going to sell it to the Beis Hamikdash gets the better price no matter what. So if the price goes down, you get lower rates. If the price goes up, you locked it in at the lower rate, right? It was like my mortgage in the United States. I don't know if that was right? Whatever I locked in, but I get a lower mortgage rate. I can always go lower, but they can't raise me. Okay. I don't know if they do that in Canada.
If only that were the case here.
Speak to your real estate agents or mortgage broker.
That's how it works. For those of you watching in the United States, it works that way with mortgages. Tanya Kavasi de Rabbi Chia bar Yosef. So we have a brisa which supports Rabbi Chia bar Yosef, and Tanya Kavasi Rabbi Yochanan, a brisa that supports Rabbi Yochanan. Tanya Kavasi Rabbi Chia bar Yosef. First, the brisa that supports Rabbi Chia bar Yosef. Beirutze midos halalu, the extra overlap of the liquid. So Mehal Yoseman, what do they do with it? Im yesh zevach acher yikravu imo. If you've got another offering that needs it, so go ahead and move it over to that offering. V'im lanu, and if it gets left overnight, yipaslu belina, it's going to get ruined, because it's already been sanctified. V'im lav, and if not, right, makitza benes mizbeach, then you can redeem it and purchase korbanos for the mizbeach. V'kaitz zemha, what is this kaitz of the mizbeach? Olos habasar l'shem ve'oros lekohanim. You bring olos, the meat of which goes to the mizbeach, and the skins go to the kohanim. Tanya Kavaz Rabbi Yochanan. Now there are those who agree with Rabbi Yochanan and says, how did they bring this? Where what was the extra? How did they get extra money in order to bring for the mizbeach? Well, it was this extra money that they would get by the changing of the prices. If they made a deal and they said that we're going to get 4 of the se'in for 1 selah, the amnu mishalosh price goes up, and now you're only going to get 3 misapek me'arba, they still get the lower price, and you're going to get 4. Mishalosh, if they said that, okay, we're going to get 3, and the amnu me'arba, and now the price goes down, and it's going to be 4, misapek me'arba, they're going to get 4. Sheyad hektish al yona, and that's what hektish gets. V'zehu sheshaninu moser nesachim l'ketzim mizbeach, and therefore this extra, now that they got an extra sa'ah out of the price, out of the deal, what do you do with it? You sell that and you use it to buy olos for the mizbeach. Says the next Mishnah, Kol korbanos hatzibor v'hayachid tunin nisachim, all korbanos, all animal korbanos, and right for the whether they are communal korbanos or they are individual korbanos. Here, let's get our chart. So we've got it.
Back to the drawing. Back to the picture board.
That's right. Here is the chart. Here, okay, all of the menachos. Every single one of these offerings that are offered come together with menachos.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
However, there are korbanos that do not. Chutz min habachor v'masra pesach. The firstborn offering, the tithed offering, the 10th animal, and the korban pesach. Those are not on that list. They don't have menachos. Ve'hachatos and ve'ha'asham. Right? Korban chatos and the korban asham also do not. Right? Whether they are individual or communal offerings. The only exception is, as we said, the chatos and the asham of the person who has tzaras, they do have, right? Pasuk specifically says they do bring, that's the exception to the rule. Says the Gemara, the exception to the exception, right? Tana Rabban or rabbis learned. Okay, let's bring our sources for this. Says in the Torah in Bamidbar. I'll read out the psukim first. The pasuk says, "Dabero b'nei Yisrael v'amarta lehem." Speak to the kisavol. When you're going to come into the land of Eretz Yisrael, Mosh v'seichem asher ani nosein lachem. The places, your dwelling places that I'm going to give to you. V'asisim yishel Hashem. You're going to bring a korban to Hashem. Ola ozevach, a korban ola, or an offering. We'll see what's the offering. Lefale neder to onidava, in order to fulfill your promises or oaths. O b'moadechem, or on your holidays. Lasos reach nichoach Hashem, in order to make a pleasant smell to Hashem. So then it says min habakar min hatzon, whether it comes from cattle or sheep, and then the pasuk continues on and tells us all about the nesachim that go together with all of them. Okay, so these are all, every line in that pasuk, every sentence, word in that pasuk tells us a different offering that is now required to receive nesachim. Says v'isisem, you're going to go to the land. V'asisem yishel Hashem. You have a fire offering to Hashem. Yachol kol ha'ola li'ishim. You might think everything that's burned on the mizbeach yeton nesachim is going to come together with oil and water, oil and wine and flour. Va'afilu mincha, even a korban mincha. Talmud lomar. Oh, that's why the pasuk continues and says just an ola, meaning animal offerings. You don't bring a mincha and then bring nesachim together with the mincha, right? Only animal offerings. Shlomim minayin. How do I know korban shlomim too? Talmud lomar zevach. It says zevach. Okay, toda minayin. How do I know to include a korban toda? Talmud lomar o zevach. Right? Or, okay, now I'm including everything. Why not include also the firstborn, the 10th animal, right? The 10th animal, korban, firstborn animal is kosher animal. Every time it gives birth, goes that first animal, if it has no blemish, gets burned as a korban. 10th animal is, I take all of my flock one time a year and I run it through a narrow passage and I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then number 10 becomes Kodesh. And I mark it, and it gets brought as a korban. And then I have the korban pesach we know, and the chatas and the asham we know. Talmud lomar lifalei neder o b'nedova. It has to be a donated offering. None of those firstborn offerings, the 10th animal, those are not donated. You have to bring them, right? So ba b'neder u nedava tonesachim. If it comes as a gift or a pledge, then it requires nesachim. Sheina ba b'neder nevava eino nesachim. But those that are not, do not. Mashma lahotzias elu. Okay, so it sounds like I've come to exclude all of these, all of these 5 offerings. Otzi es hachovos habos machmas haregel beregel. Okay, so why don't I also now, when you have to come to when it's a Yom Tov, so you have to go to the Beis Hamikdash and you're supposed to bring an Olas Re'iyah. It's a mitzvah to bring a korban Olas Re'iyah, and so that should also be excluded because it's an obligatory offering. It shouldn't have nesachim. Umay ninhu Olas Re'iyah v'shamei chagiga. We've got an Ola that I'm supposed to bring. That's my Olas Re'iyah, and I bring a korban shlomim as my chagiga, and so those also should not require nesachim because they're obligatory offerings. Talmud Lomar, therefore the pasuk says, "O b'moadechem." Yeah, but also if you're bringing it on a holiday. So those that because you're bringing it on a holiday, you're going to bring nesachim. Kol haba b'moadechem ton nesachim. All those that come on a holiday get nesachim. Okay, great. Mashmeh lahavi aselu. So now you've included the olos re'iyah. You've included the shami chagiga. Avi si'irei chatos. What about the in every korban musaf for every Yom Tov there's a sin offering, goat sin offering. What about that?
Rosh Chodesh would be considered Yom Tov for that situation.
Sorry,
Rosh Chodesh would be considered Yom Tov.
and Rosh Chodesh potentially also, right? That's a fair point, right? Hoel uboin chova beregel, since they're also obligatory, but moadechem they would be obligatory. Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says v'chitase ben bakar, if you are bringing a cattle. Ben bakar beklal haya. So now the cow was already included. They were included. We already knew all of the animals were included. V'lama yatsa. So why is the pasuk specifying again and telling us that you're going to bring the nesachim for a cow? Lahaki she'lav, in order to compare ma ben bakar miyuchad ba ben neder unadava, just like a cow is unique in that it comes as a pledged offering, afkol ba ben neder umenadava. So therefore, it only is going to include those things in requiring nesachim that are pledges. So the olos and the shlamim, which come obligatory, require nesachim. Why? Because there's another type of ola and a shlamim that can be brought when you feel like it. However, the korban chatos, when it's a community offering, doesn't get nesachim. Why? Because even though it's brought on a Yom Tov, there's no such thing as bringing that without a obligation. Right? Only the ola and the shlamim, which can be brought without an obligation, gets nesachim when it is brought with an obligation. But korban chatos never does. Okay, good. So now I've excluded my korban chatos again. Lasos reach nichoach laHashem min habakar min hatzon. I'm supposed to make a pleasant offering smell from the cattle or from the sheep. Matam lomer. What does that tell me in the pasuk? Lefish nemer, because the pasuk says ola. So it says in Ola, Shomeani, Afila Olos Ha'of. I might think bird offerings too. So therefore, right, I might bring Menachos, might bring the Nesachim together with that. Right? Olos Ha'of b'mashma. Talmud Lofer, it says, Min ha'bakar min hatzon, only from cows or sheep, not birds. Divrei Rabbi Yoshia. That's what Rabbi Yoshia says. Rabbi Yonasan Rabbi Yochanan says, Eino tzarech. I don't need that pasuk. Because Harei Omer, the pasuk says Zevach. Says it's a slaughter offering. V'of no zevach. Of is not a zevach. Zvachim are animal offerings, not bird offerings. Im kain, if that's so. Ma tamad lomer min habakar min hatzon. So then why does it say? Then, if it's not excluding birds, why do you need cattle and sheep? Lifi shenamar, because the pasuk says, way back at the beginning of Vayikra, Adam ki akriv mikem korban laHashem. Any human being who wants to bring a korban to Hashem, min habehema min habakar, from any animal, from cattle, min hatzon, or from sheep, yachol haomer harei alei ola. I might think that if a person says, I would like to bring a korban as an ola, yavi mishneim, you've got to bring both, a cow and a sheep. Right? Because it says, you're bringing from an animal, you want to bring korban? It's got to come from a bakar min hatzon. So it means I need both. Talmud Lomar, min habakar o min hatzon. That's why I've got the O here. It's from the cattle or from the sheep, one or the other. Ratza echad mevi, ratza shnayim mevi. You want to bring one animal, you bring one animal. You want to bring two, you bring two. You don't have to bring both. For Rabbi Yonasan, lama likra. So Rabbi Yonasan, why does he have that pasuk? Ha'amar, because after all, in the end, Rabbi Yonasan, Rabbi Yonasan himself has the rule that he based on the pasuk that says ki ish asher yakalas aviv ves imo mos yumas, that if a person comes to curse his mother and his father, he shall die. So do you need to curse both your mother and your father in order to die, or just one or the other? Rabbi Yonasan says, right, one or the other. It doesn't have to be both. So whenever the pasuk says two things, it automatically, we presume it means or. I don't need the pasuk until ad sheyifrod lecha kasav yachdav. Unless the pasuk says together, it means separately. So therefore, when it says that you're bringing ola from the bakor or from the tzon, of course it means or, not and, because you have to presume they're separate. If that's the case, so then that pasuk is extra in order to exclude birds. Okay, ve'itzterich. Now, the Gemara says, okay, so why does he need the pasuk? So he says, that was Rabbi Yonas's point, is that you do need the pasuk. Oh, why doesn't he need that? He doesn't need the word O in order to tell me they're separate. Leave the word O out, and I would already know they're separate. The answer is no, I need it because Salkadai Techamina. I would have thought to have said, Hoel uksiv umin hatzon. It says, and also from the sheep. That's like it's saying, since it says and, you want to bring it from the cattle and from the sheep. So that's like saying, put it together because it's and. Okay, so therefore now it has to say, oh, or in order to separate, or and from the sheep, right? Ul Rabbi Yoshia de Amar Afal Gav de Lo Ksiv. So what about Rabbi Yoshia, who says even if it does not say Yachdav, it's Kemad Siv Yachdav, that you always have to presume that it means that they both have to be together, right? Kemod Kemid Siv Yachdav Dami, so it would be the same. So Li Boi Kra. So now I need this pasuk in the word O in order to be able to tell me I don't need to bring both. So haksiv im ola korbano min habakar ve minatzon korbano. It says if the ola is his korban and from the cattle, and then it says ve minatzon korbano, or if it's from its sheep. So therefore, it's clear that I can bring. Right? It already says it from that pasuk, from those later psukim. It's clear that I can bring either one. I don't have to bring both. Ve'idach. So Rabbi Yonasan will say, it's tzirich. No, I still need that. Why? Salkadai Techamina. I would have thought, Hani Mili b'mefaresh. That's if you state that when I'm making my neder, what I want to do, right? So then I can choose. I can say I want to bring a cow, I want to bring a sheep. Then, okay, or that's fine. Aval bistama, but what if I don't specify? What if I just say I'm going to bring a korban olah? So then leisi mitarvayu. Then maybe the pasuk is telling me I do need to bring both. Kamash Molan. Therefore, the pasuk is saying, that even if you are not specifying, I'm going to bring an olah, you only don't have to bring both. Either one will suffice. Okay. Amar Mar. So Mar said, do we have time to get on? This is going to keep on going down. So maybe
no Mishnah looping on this.
nothing stops for quite a while. So okay, the next thing goes on and on and on. So let's stop here,
Moving right along.
and we will pick up tomorrow at 8:30.